The year is 1817. On the quiet, rolling hills of Adams, Tennessee, stands a peaceful farm, home to the Bell family. They are respected, prosperous, and, by all accounts, content with their lives. Yet, they are blissfully unaware that an ancient and malevolent curse is about to shatter their existence. A darkness born from a disturbed grave and a deep, festering hatred. This is not a work of fiction. This is the true story of the Bellwitchen alleged demonic entity that tormented an entire family, defied investigation by a future president, and is believed to have committed murder. It is one of the most violent and well-documented supernatural cases in American history. A story more terrifying than any movie. The horror began subtly, as it so often does. One day, while inspecting his fields, John Bell, the patriarch of the family, encountered a bizarre creature. It had the body of a dog, but the head of a rabbit, with unnatural glowing red eyes that stared at him with unnerving intelligence. He shot at the strange animal, but it vanished without a trace. This unnerving encounter was merely a prelude, a harbinger of the nightmare that was about to unfold within the walls of his own home. Soon after, the disturbances began. Faint knocking sounds started echoing from the doors and walls at all hours of the night. At first, the family dismissed it, searching for a rational source, but the sounds only intensified. The knocking became a violent banging, as if a battering ram was being slammed against the outside of the house. This was quickly followed by other inexplicable noises. The chilling sound of heavy chains being dragged across the wooden floors. The grating scrape of unseen claws scratching at the walls and bedposts. And the sickening sound of something gnawing and chewing. The family would search the house frantically, finding nothing. The children would wake up screaming, their bed covers violently ripped from them by an unseen force. The family's initial attempts to find a logical explanation proved futile. There were no pranksters, no hidden animals, no structural faults that could account for the escalating phenomena. A creeping, insidious fear began to seep into every corner of their home, turning their once peaceful farmhouse into a prison of psychological torment. The disembodied sounds soon gave way to a far more personal and terrifying form of communication. Faint whispers began to emanate from the shadows, seemingly from nowhere at all. At first, they were too quiet to understand, like the sound of an old woman mumbling to herself just out of earshot. But over time, these whispers grew in strength and clarity, coalescing into a distinct, hateful voice. The entity, which would later identify itself as Kate or Old Kate, claiming to be the spirit of a disgruntled former neighbor. Kate Bats began its campaign of terror. The voice was everywhere and nowhere at once. It could sing hymns with perfect pitch one moment, only to spew vile obscenities and blasphemous rants the next. It seemed to know the family's deepest secrets, quoting private conversations and mocking their fears, while the entire family was subjected to its taunts. The entity reserved a special, sadistic cruelty for the youngest daughter, Betsy Bell. She became the primary target of its physical assaults. Invisible hands would slap her face, leaving red welts. Her hair would be violently pulled, yanking her from her bed. She was pinched, pricked with pins, and bruised by a force no one could see or fight. The family was held hostage, terrorized by a spectral voice that could seamlessly shift from quoting scripture to delivering horrific threats, often aimed directly at the patriarch, John Bell himself. The entity made its intentions clear. It hated John Bell and promised to see him dead. The Bell Witch's curse was not one of idle threats. It was a promise of escalating violence. The entity declared its sinister intent to murder John Bell, and soon after, his health began to mysteriously and rapidly decline. He started experiencing agonizing fits, his body contorting in seizures that left him weak and breathless. He complained of a feeling like a stick was being jammed in his throat, making it nearly impossible to speak or swallow. The torment was relentless, a slow and torturous breakdown of his body and spirit, orchestrated by an invisible tormentor who reveled in his suffering. News of the Bell family's plight spread far and wide, capturing the attention of people from all over the region. Among them was one of the most famous and powerful men in Tennessee, General Andrew Jackson, who would later become the 7th President of the United States. A man known for his skepticism and iron will, Jackson was intrigued by the sensational stories. He assembled a group of men, including a self-proclaimed witch tamer, and traveled to the Bell farm, determined to expose the whole affair as a hoax. However, the moment their wagon crossed onto the Bell property, it inexplicably stopped. The horses could not move it an inch, even under the lash of the whip. It was then that a disembodied voice boomed from the air, announcing that they could proceed. Suddenly, the wagon moved on its own. That night, Jackson and his men were subjected to the full force of the entity's power. They were slapped, poked, and had their blankets ripped away. The witch tamer himself was viciously attacked and pleaded to be taken away. By morning, a terrified Andrew Jackson and his men fled the farm. He was later quoted as saying, "I would rather face the entire British Army than to spend another night with the Bell Witch." On December 20th, 1820, after years of torment, John Bell finally succumbed. He was found on his deathbed, unresponsive after suffering a particularly violent series of seizures. The family was overwhelmed with grief, but their horror was compounded by a discovery made in the medicine cabinet. Beside his usual medication was a small, unfamiliar vial containing a dark, unknown liquid. As the family deliberated on what it could be, the triumphant, cackling voice of the Bell Witch filled the room. It proudly boasted that it had forced the poison down John Bell's throat while he slept, gleefully declaring its victory in killing him. A test of the liquid on the family cat confirmed its lethal nature, and the vial was thrown into the fireplace, where it erupted in a brilliant blue flame. The death of John Bell left a permanent scar of sorrow and trauma on his family. Even after its ultimate act of malice, the entity's cruelty continued. It relentlessly harassed Betsy Bell, forbidding her from marrying her beloved Joshua Gardner, until she was finally forced to break off the engagement. The Bell Witch continued to haunt the remaining family members for several more years before its presence gradually faded, promising to return in 7 years. A promise it reportedly kept. The torment, though less frequent, would occasionally resurface to remind the family of the horror that had destroyed their lives. Today, more than 200 years later, the story of the Bell Witch persists as one of America's most well-documented and profoundly chilling supernatural cases. The land where the Bell Farm once stood, particularly the nearby Bell Witch Cave, is considered a focal point of paranormal activity, believed by many to still be haunted by the malevolent entity known as Kate. The tale serves as a grim and unsettling reminder that there may be forces in this world that are truly evil, capable of inflicting not just psychological terror, but tangible physical harm, and even claiming human lives. The legend of the Bell Witch is not merely a ghost story. It is a gruesome and enduring warning, the true account of a murderous curse that destroyed a man and left an indelible legacy of terror upon his family.